So we're in the second week of our Before All Things discipleship journey. And in this journey, we are asking the fundamental question, is God really before all things in our life? This week, we're focusing in on the parable of the talents, which is found in Matthew chapter 25. And as we look at this story, we're going to begin to answer the question, do we treat the things that God has given us as resources to be used for God's glory or for our own joy? And how do those things work together? So do you view your resources as something to be used for God and by God, or are you using those on yourself? So grab your Bibles and let's dive into week 2 of Before All Things.
Tonight we're going to talk about what it means to be in middle management. Okay, what it means to be in middle management. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 3, it says this: As Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us when these things will be." And what these things are is Jesus made this prophecy. He pointed the disciples to the temple. He said, "Yo, check out the temple. That whole thing's going to be torn down in 3 days. It'll be put back together." And they didn't know he was talking about his life, death, and resurrection. They thought he was talking actually about the temple. And so they come to him and they say privately, "Hey, tell us when these things will be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" In other words, hey, Jesus, we've seen the Left Behind movies. Is that the way it goes down or not? That's what they want to know. And so for the rest of 24, and this is why this is important, because when you get to chapter 25, he's going to tell 3 parables, and he's answering the question from the beginning of 24. If you don't realize that he's answering the question from the beginning of 24, you'll miss the whole point of the parables in 25. And so where we're going to camp out is in that second parable, in the parable of the talents. But what you can't miss, because if you miss this, you'll miss the whole thing. He's answering a question. He's not talking even really about financial planning and that sort of stuff. He's answering the question of eternity. What's it going to be like when we're all done here, when you breathe your last here on earth? One of the things that's already different between the way you and I see our lives and this parable here is, in this parable, none of the servants had any questions at all as to where all of the money came from. You see, if you and I could just fundamentally get that, it would change everything. If you and I fundamentally understood that everything we have is on loan from the Master for a while and he's coming back and it ain't ours, it would change everything in regards to what we do with his money. He gives out 5 and 2 and 1, each according to his ability, and then he went away. Now again, remember, this is a parable about Jesus going away and coming back one day. Verse 16, and he who had received the 5 talents, these are millions of dollars, by the way. He who had received the 5 talents, he went at once. He didn't wait. He went at once, and he traded them, and he made 5 talents more. By the way, not for himself. Not for himself. You know what he knew? This is my master's money. And do you know why he went at once? And you know why he risked it? Here's why he risked it. Because he had faith and he trusted his master. So all he did with the money that had been entrusted him is exactly what he knew the master would do with the money that had been entrusted him. That's all he did. And so he goes at once. Verse 17, I love this. So also he who had the 2 talents, he made 2 talents more. He did the exact same thing the guy with 5 did. But he who had received 1 talent, he went and he dug in the ground and he hid his master's money. Why? Because he's gripped with fear. He's gripped with fear, and he's looking for safety and security. And so what he's doing is he's thinking, what is the best that I can do with this money? Not, can I risk this in faith to do what the master would have me do? Verse 19, now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward. Now just real quick, imagine the thought process of the 3 servants when they hear the master's back in town. Imagine what the guy with the 5 talents that risked it in the name of the master and made 5 more. Imagine what he's thinking. When he gets a knock on his door, hey, the master's back in town and wants to see you. He's probably like, really? Come on, have you ever gotten it right at work when the boss is gone and he gets back and you're like, wait, is he back yet? Is he back? Why? Because you can't wait to get your review. Hey, you want to talk about last week? You know how it goes. That's what this guy's thinking. Okay, he's excited to see him. And so after a long time, the master of the servant came forward to settle accounts, and he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered me 5 talents. Now, my translation says, here I made 5 talents more. It really means like, here you go. You see that? Here you go. Here's yours. Here's what you have entrusted to me. And his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. Now, even if you're new to church, maybe you've heard that if you love Jesus and you show up to heaven one day, that God's going to look at you and say, well done, good and faithful servant. This is where that comes from. And the reason it comes from here is because he's not just talking about earthly investments at all. He's talking about these eternal investments of our entire life. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful. That's a key word. Faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. So this is not a bummer for this guy. It's not. This is not a guy that begrudgingly comes to the Lord and is like, I sure do wish I could have used some of this for a jet ski. No. He gets this invitation to enter into this eternal joy of the master, verse 22. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. And his master said to him, the exact same thing. This is huge. He didn't say, well, you know, taking 2 and making 2 is pretty good, but man, I had a guy that had 5 and made 5. No. There's no comparison here. Do you know what God wants out of you? He wants you to be the you that He created you to be. That's why we should never, ever, ever, ever compare ourselves. You should never look at your 2 talents and be like, dang it. Because what happens is, if you look at your 2 and compare it to the 5, you begin to beat yourself out and think, well, God must love the 5 better than me. And then the other things that happens is you look at the 2 and the guy with the 1, well, at least I ain't the guy with the 1. And so you're full of pride or condemnation, neither of which are fruits of the gospel. And so this guy with the 2 gets the exact same well done, good and faithful servant. It's not based on the amount, but on the stewardship. Verse 24, and he also who had received the 1 talent. Now, if this was like a movie, this is where the soundtrack changes. Like it's dun, 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 in comes this guy saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was, here's the key word, afraid. He says, so I was afraid. You remember the key word for the other 2 guys? He says, because you were faithful. You know, I try to teach on this over and over and over and over. The opposite of faith is not doubt. If you've got doubts, you'll make a great disciple. Pick up your doubts and by faith follow after Jesus. There's still a million things I haven't figured out, okay? And all kind of things. I'm like, Lord, I don't know why you didn't answer that prayer, or why you didn't do it that way, or why do those people have to live in crack land? I mean, I don't get it, God. But the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is fear. And here's why. Because fear paralyzes. Fear causes you to take a talent, this resources that God has given you, and it paralyzes you because you live with this scarcity mentality and says, the best I can do is dig a hole and just hide it here. That's what fear does. And what the first man and the second man did is by faith, they trusted God, the master. Basically, it's evidence that they knew him, and the way you know that they knew him is they did with his money what he would have done with his money. Verse 26, but his master answered the guy with the 1 talent, you wicked and slothful servant. I always find it interesting that Jesus calls him slothful or lazy. Because if you looked at him, you'd be like, no, he's the busiest one of the 3. I mean, the first 2 guys just like went to Wall Street and said, all right, I'll buy some of that and some of that, you know? But the guy with the 1, he was busy. A talent would be, I mean, this is just, it's not like on a debit card. He's got to go and dig a hole. And I don't know if you've ever tried to bury $1 million. I wish I would have the problem one day, right? But I don't know what size hole that you have to, let's just say it's the size of this room. It's a big hole. And you got to dig this hole and put all your silver coins in there, and then you got to cover it up, make sure nobody's looking. And then you plant some plants over it, and do some stuff. And then you hear he's coming, and you're like, well, get the shovel. And you got to go out there with your little metal detector and find out where your hole was and dig the thing back up. I don't know how many wheelbarrow trips it is back. If you're watching that guy digging and undigging, you're thinking, man, this is a busy, busy man. And Jesus says, no. He is wicked and slothful. You know, sometimes we're really, really lazy, not in our activity, but we're lazy in our faith. That we're just busy at the wrong things. And so he says, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scatter no seed. And then you ought to have invested my money, not your money, my money with the bankers. And all the bankers said, see, praise God, there it is. And at my coming, I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. Which, you know, some people are like, that's not fair. Again, fairness ended at the Garden of Eden. Fairness is not a biblical value. Verse 29, for to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away, and cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Not because of what he did, but because what he did revealed that he did not know the master. And again, what Jesus is talking about here is eternity. So let me just ask you this. If God gave you $1,000 right now, I mean, on the way out, Jesus himself is at the, hey, thank you for being here. See you next week. $1,000. Do with it whatever you want. What would you do with it? And some of you think, oh, I know what I would do. I would give to Jesse's will. Well, let me see. He's giving you all your thousands of dollars that you have. That has actually already happened. And so, if you were to describe your own financial situation or attitude, would it be one of faith or would it be one of fear? You see, because all three of these parables, the first parable in this trilogy of parables is this, is do you know him? Don't miss the party. Surrender to Jesus before it's too late. And then the next two are, and if you do, then this is what your life looks like. The initiating factor is your relationship with Jesus. And then the response is, what do you do with your time, talent, and treasure? That's what the next two are. Do you invest in eternal things? And do you feed and take care of the poor and the least of these? Here's how you get to heaven. If Jesus is Lord of your life, you go to heaven. That's what that means. If your money is Lord of your life, you don't go to heaven. Because Jesus doesn't do second. If he's not first in your life, then you don't know him. That's what he's saying. And that is good news to every single one of us. So, with what you are doing with the money that God has entrusted you, does it evidence that God is first in your life? See, here's the point. That God has entrusted you with time and talents and treasure, and what you do with them declares what you believe about God. You see, that's the point of the parable of the talents. That what these men did with their talents, did with this money, evidenced what they actually believed about the master. This guy named Francis Chan says this. He's an incredible pastor. He used to be a pastor out in California. Now he just travels all over the place. And he said this, everything we do will either bring reward or regret. Everything we do will either bring reward or regret. There will come a day where you stand before the Lord and give an account for your life. And on that day, what you did with your time, it will either bring reward or regret. You'll stand there and think, you know what? Was it a good idea that I watched every episode of every sitcom for the last 25 years and that's how I spent my time? Or should I have invested my time in something else and been rewarded? Is it the best idea that I spent everything God had given me on me, or should I have invested it into something that would last forever? And he uses this illustration, and I just want to show you. You see, imagine this rope here. Imagine that it goes on not just to the stage, but all the way around the room and to Bay Meadows and back and then forever and ever, okay? That it is eternally long. And imagine this rope is a timeline of your life. And it stretches forever, which means this, I hope you know this, that everybody's going to live forever somewhere. Everybody's going to live forever somewhere. And imagine this was the timeline of your life, and this little red part over here on this end, this is the part that we get on earth. But at some day, you're going to breathe your last here, and you're going to breathe your next in eternity. And if you're a Christian, you're going to live in eternity with Christ forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, right? And here's what's crazy. we live our lives, so many of us live our lives with the perspective like it's all about just this little part. And literally, if it's 17 or 117, this little part compared to forever and ever and ever and ever is so little. But what's crazy is what we do in this little part determines all the rest of this. And you know how most of us live? Man, we're really stoked about this, right? And we think, okay, when I'm right here, boy, I am going to study and study and study so I can get into a good school right there, so I can get into a graduate school right there, and I'll show my dad, all right? And then I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to get another job and another job, and I'm going to work and work and work and work, and then I'm going to invest, and I'm going to put it away. Why? Because, boy, when I get to right here, it is going to be cool. 20 years of vacation, right? There. Now, if this is true, you got to admit, that's pretty dumb. Is it not? Because I can just tell you, I've had some conversations with some friends about what we are doing in the Before All Things initiative and in general, what the Martins have decided to do to leverage the gifts and the talents and the treasures that God has given us. And I've had some people saying, what are you doing? Because if you give too much right there, when you get right there, you might be messed up. And I'm like, you know how dumb you are? Because look at all of this right here. I'm into this. This is what I want. I want to live 10,000 years, right? Just praising Him. I'm more concerned about all of this than this little part right here. Here's what's crazy, though. When you live with this in mind over here, this part gets way, way, way better. It's just true. It's just true. That God has given every single one of us time and talents and treasures and all kinds of gifts. And what we do with that screams out what you actually believe about God.
I'm Carly.
And I'm Jeff, and we've been coming to the Church of 1122 since we were back at Beach United Methodist. So we've been here since the open. So I'm a deacon at the Church of 1122 currently. I was commissioned in the first round of deacons a few years ago, and so that's been my honor to kind of serve under that. Specifically, I was in the New Gen ministry for a while there just because we have kids and I love kids, and just recently transitioned over into the tech side just because I think it's fun. And we do some amazing stuff from a tech perspective, so I just wanted to be involved in that as well.
Because I'm Pastor James' executive assistant, I created because he preaches for 4 services, so we have a pastor coverage team. Somebody needs to be with each pastor at all times to just take care of the people that want to talk to him, need assistance, before and after service, if he needs anything, or any of the preachers of the week that might be preaching. So that's where I usually am serving.
And so we really have grown, I would say, in our faith tremendously as a couple, which is really what has strengthened our relationship too. And
with that, when we started knowing we needed to get our finances right, is why we took Crown, which was offered at Beach, and over a 2.5-year process, got out of debt, which strengthened our relationship even more so, because financial freedom is one of the keys, I think, to a strong marriage under God's authority. A difficult aspect of giving for us in the beginning, when we committed to Crown and taking the class and all, like, okay, we're going to get out of debt, that meant changing our lifestyle, our budget, so-called budget that we didn't really have. And a big part of that was going out to eat and just being social with friends. And not that we couldn't have people over and say, everybody bring a dish, but we're both very extroverted people, and we love being around people, so we like to do things. And food is always involved when there's a bunch of people. And so that was really tough, because we found that we had to say no to more than we wanted to. And like going to dinner after church was kind of like a big group thing and big family fun time. And we couldn't do that a lot for a very long season. So there was some hard times and arguments, kind of like, oh, let's just do it, and he's the stronger one, and I'm like the free spirit. I'm like, let's just do it. And so we would go back and forth. And so I think where God has helped both of us is where I've been strong. He's allowed me to help loosen his reins, and then as we've gotten out of debt, and then vice versa, he's helped tighten my reins when we need to be.
What I struggled with initially was I'm going to miss it. We're not going to be able to go out to eat. We're not going to be able to do the things we want to do. At the time we didn't have babies, so we had one baby? Yeah, we had one baby. So we're not going to have more babies, things like that. And God just said, trust me. You know, I've got this plan for you and it's perfect. And so watch me roll it out. If you let go, if you open your hands, your tight grip on your wallet, watch what I can do. And that was really cool.
Well, if I was going to encourage somebody to join this generosity initiative, I would say something along the lines of, you just don't know what you're missing. I get so excited to share good news, and I want people to be a part of anything exciting going on that I'm experiencing. And I think for me, that would be it. I would want people to get on board just to feel the joy and excitement of what God is doing, and to be a part of this movement, to see the many blessings that are happening, and to be able to just say you're a part of it. And in this small speck of who we are in this whole big world, that we in this time, in this place, in this moment right here, right now, would be able to get to actually witness some of the miracles that are happening here at the church. And that all starts with giving your heart to Him. And so that's what I would say.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Carly.
And He is before all things.